So in the UK, like the examples I think we've already heard about this morning, going back to the last century, we had the Royal Fine Arts Commission, which was an aesthetic control of how buildings were going to look, and they had a kind of crit. I'm saying this, but I know Matthew Carmona's on the call. Matthew's written books and done masses of work on this. He knows much more about it than I do. So we had this history of, as other countries have, of quite a sort of maybe highbrow approach to assessing design quality. But then in the 1990s, we had Richard Rogers coming into play, helping to create an Urban Renaissance report in the UK, which was very influential and led to the beginning of CABE, the Commission for Architecture and Built Environment, at about the turn of the century. The CABE took over from the Royal Fine Arts Commission and was able to, with government money, was able to develop the design review product, as it were, as part of its design governance programme. And it supported regional programmes across the UK. And there are still some, I could talk about London today, but Scotland and Wales and some other parts of England have also got design review programmes. 2010s, we saw the end of CABE, the funding was withdrawn, and CABE sort of linked in with something called the Design Council, and they wanted to carry on doing design review, but they didn't have any money for it. So it used to be free, funded by government, and a little bit elitist, dare I say. But from the 2010s, the Design Council CABE developed a product, I suppose, where the developer, the scheme promoter, paid for the design review. And they were quite successful in showing that that could work, and it really changed the whole design review model and picture in the UK. In terms of design governance more generally, there's a picture up here outside UCL, Matthew will be in there somewhere, of the start of the Place Alliance, which sort of took over some of the other elements of, or attempted to provide an umbrella for some of the other elements of work that CABE was doing. And a sort of said a few flowers bloom rather than 1,000 flowers bloom, but there is design governance working going on in the UK now, but it is more fractured than it was under CABE. Maybe it's better for that, I wouldn't like to say. Now in the 2020s, we've had a Building Better, Building Beautiful commission from the government, and we've also had national design unit being pushed forward, being promoted, and our planning system is under review. So everything's sort of up in the air, and the flip between whether design quality is about aesthetics or it's about function or it's about both keeps going backwards and forwards. So you can imagine the Building Better, Building Beautiful government commission was a bit more about aesthetics. Oh, that's not working. Go on. In London, I suppose the story in a certain way mirrored the rest of the country. So we had in the 20th century, the GLC, which was the Greater London Council, was abolished in the 80s. So we had a lack of coordinated governance in London. There are 33 different local authorities in London that cover the whole the metropolitan city, and then there's more outside of that. But in 2000, we created a new mayor with the Greater London Authority, and Transport for London created. And Richard Rogers, who was behind that Urban Renaissance report, I'm sure many of you know his work very well, became the mayor's architectural advisor. And he and the mayor at that time set up something called Design for London, and that's what Mark really, I think, was going to talk about, which is why I've put it in this talk. And it combines design teams from the strategic authorities in London, Transport for London and Greater London Authority. At that time, it was also housing and development authorities that were in the city as well. And Urban Design London, where I work, was part of the Design for London. UDL does the training, networking, sort of advocacy, more kind of non-official stuff, whereas the GLA, TfL and the housing and development parts of Design for London were much more about actual schemes and getting the schemes built and design quality, reviewing those. So Design for London was disbanded in 2010s at the same time as CABE was, roughly speaking, because of government changes. But we've all carried on and tried to work together as much as possible. And I've put some pictures here of the stuff that's recently come out from the GLA, the Greater London Authority, on their Good Growth by Design programs. There's lots of good stuff happening on design governance and design quality requirements overall. And also something called public practice was set up, and I think this is quite important to the London story on design review. Public practice is a way of taking people out of architecture or other design private sector firms for a year or so and placing them in a local authority. And it's done really well. It's on its second year, I think, or third year now, and it's placed dozens and dozens of people into local authorities. A lot of the time, those public practice people are the ones who set up new design review panels. So I'm mentioning it here. So design governance for us is a patchwork or a quilt of lots of different types of work. And they all need to, if possible, try to work together. As you can imagine from what I've just explained, that can be quite difficult with all these different organisations and teams. In terms of design review itself, the project device is design review, and the way that that links with the training that we provide and networking, and those are ways of gathering information about schemes particularly, which inform policy, has been quite strong over the last few years, and it's something that we do try hard to make work. But looking at design review or project advice, whichever you want to call it, in a little bit more detail, I've already explained how the Design Council created this business model. But also the London policies and national policies guide design guidance as well, and the planning system endorsed and required it. That had a massive effect on its take-up, and it has grown hugely, the amount of design review in London over the last 5 years. So the London plan that we've got, a draft plan at the moment, it has an approach to design quality assessment and density calculations, density assessments, which require design review as part of the process. So you can imagine that changes people's attitude to whether they're doing it or not. Is it going to help them get planning permission? So the GLA and UDL together do surveys every couple of years on what's going on with the design review panels. We're going to do another one in September, and we're just putting the questions together. So the data I've got at the moment is a little bit old. But in 2018, there were these. This is a map that's showing all the different local authorities across London, and the colours are not showing necessarily that there is or is a good panel or not, but how they're managed. So because people are paying for design review, the developers are paying for it, it's become a commercially viable operation. So we have Frame, which is a private company, the Design Council itself, and Design South East, which is a little bit like UDL, who are paid to manage the panels from the fees that the applicants pay, and they do it on behalf of the boroughs. But as you can see from this map, in 2018, most panels were actually run by the boroughs themselves. But again, they're using the money that they're getting in to pay for the staff to manage the panels. Before that was started, there were 4 panels in London. Now there's 31 at the moment. And to to help with the coordination and quality across all the different panels, to try to ensure that it's as even as possible, the GLA and UDL helping them as well, came up with a quality review charter design. They call it quality review rather than design review panel charter, but it's the same thing, and that's on websites, and I'll show you where those are. But it explains what a good panel is, how it procures its members, how open and transparent it is, how it makes information, once it is publicly available, of the panel letters or outcomes available for the general public, etc., etc. So that's sort of just a benchmark of quality to try to get consistency. As I said already, 2/3 of authorities run their own ones. I think that's probably gone down, so that those numbers from 2018, there's now probably about 4 or 5 more panels, and I think they're mainly subcontracted out. In 2018, there were 82,000 planning applications in London, and only 550 were reviewed. That number will have gone up a lot. I think it probably have doubled since then, but it's still a low percentage of the planning applications. Obviously, most planning applications in our system are little household extensions and things like that, but a lot of major schemes are not getting reviewed, and that is that's a worry for some. Only 40% of panels in 2018, when these questions were asked, regularly check the outcomes of their reviews. So went and said, okay, the panel said X. Was that followed through? Did that lead to permission and the building being granted or not? So most weren't doing it, but now we're trying to work with all the panels to make sure they all do. However, 75% of the panel managers did think that the advice improved the schemes. And there's a link in this here to the survey, which I will put in the chat after the presentation. Moving on relatively swiftly. So the 2020 panels, I'll just go and take you to our website, because one of the things that we've done in the last year to try to help with the what's it called? Hopefully you can see that. Can you see a website now? Yes, hopefully. Is to collect information about all the panels and to put them on one website. So here we've got a list of all the different design review panels in London. So there's most of them to look at for a borough to look at planning applications, but some of them, this LLDC quality review panel, that's a particular development corporation for somewhere part of London that's getting a lot of development. But if you click on any of these, what you'll see now, if you want to know more about London design review panels, is key contacts, where their website is, and also if you click through, so it will open whichever one, you'll see a page on each panel which says what their fees are and who the members are and what their terms of reference are. You can click through to those as well. So hopefully that is helping to transparency of the whole system in London. We also have on here the London Design Review story, which I'm not going to go through all this detail in this talk, but if you are really interested, the most up-to-date information is here. Okay, let me shut down my, go back to the presentation. So our wish list, I suppose, moving forward with taking the design review story onwards, is to have more training. So we have been doing training for the panel's members, chairs, managers, etc., on things like how to chair a meeting, how to write a good report out of it, etc. And that has, I think, been quite helpful. We run about 5 or 6 of those a year at the moment. There's about 500 independent panel members in London, and they are mainly architects, but a lot of them are landscape architects, highway engineers, planners, etc., etc., structural engineers. Every panel should be quite mixed in its makeup on the day. There's also been a lot of talk about community panels, which has been mentioned already this morning. So the concern that some people have that there's this, in this room, there's these aloof people who are making decisions or pontificating about what happens in a particular area, and the community should have a say. Now the panel is, as also been mentioned, the panel advice is non-binding. It's part of the planning process and needs to be taken into consideration, again, alongside all the other input to that system, which includes community engagement. However, there is a move now to set up more community panels. I think there's 3 now in London, and they are using the same processes and setup as the design review panels, but they are based with using community members, but they don't keep changing the community members. They appoint and pay certain community people, people from a community, to be on those panels, and they build up their skills, and they're involved in, you know, for 2 or 3 years. We're also working to try to get more feedback from the panel users, because they're paying a lot of money to get their schemes seen by the panels. They are very influential, the outcomes. So we're working at, you know, what are their advices on how they'd like to see things improved and changed. And we're also talking to all the boroughs and the GLA about setting up a consistent monitoring and evaluation system to prove the value. I think most people involved in the panels know that there's value, and there is some data on this, but not enough at the moment. And it's because a lot of the panels don't follow through to find out what happened to the schemes afterwards. That's what makes it quite difficult to get that data. And we want to see as many schemes as possible, probably more than is being seen at the moment, and review that review charter. So I think, yeah, so I've already shown you our website. I'll put the link in if you want to know any more. Thank you very much. I hope that's useful for you.